Right, thank you so much for making time and for joining us on this CNBC Africa special. It's a conversation that is very timely, and of course we need to be having every day, every now and then. It is a conversation around financial inclusion and of course the space that fintechs are playing in this and more. We're going to be looking at Rwanda focus and of course from a global perspective, but also not forgetting the Pan-African aspect of this particular journey. My name as always is Eugene. Anangwe, and I want to welcome my panelists on this particular conversation. I have none other than Pepita Melisa, who's the Growth and Partnership Lead at Pesachoice. Thank you for making time on the show.
My pleasure.
And of course, making a reconnection, I would call it, because she's a friend of CNBC Africa, Closing Bell, Power Lunch, Nshuti Mbabazi. She's the Lead Africa Advocacy and Partnerships at Better Than Cash Alliance. Thank you for making
Eugene. It's good to connect again on financial inclusion.
Indeed. It's a long journey, and I want us just to start from there. What do you feel, looking back, if you turn the arm of the clock back from the time that it was still an initiative to go cashless for this country, Rwanda, and many years later? What story are you able to share with us on that?
Well, first of all, Rwanda taught me everything I needed to know about the power of financial inclusion. And it's a place that I don't need to preach the gospel anymore. Because the transformation is visible. You find the availability of digital payments really almost in every corner of the country, be it at the market. Because I remember saying, if I can pay digitally at Chimirongo Market, then I can retire from talking about cashless. And indeed, not just Chimirongo Market, but I can drive from Kigali all the way to Nyagatare and beyond and experience digital payments. And so seeing what that has done for Rwanda's economy, especially during that tough time of COVID, I can only imagine the possibilities for the continent as we become one Africa market, the AFC, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and people can be able to move through borders with a seamless payments experience. So thanks to the lessons that I had here, the growth that I continue to see, the inclusion, even though there are still gaps from a gender perspective, the numbers are super encouraging. Government's commitment is encouraging between the ministry tasked with the digital economy, the central bank, the policymakers at the Ministry of Financial Inclusion. No one needs convincing. And that's really where we need to get for the rest of the continent. I think the last mile is now on cross-border trade, because that remains heavily cash. And that's the frontier for the continent to get done together. Right.
You mentioned, the cross-border trade. You mentioned the gap within, the gender aspect. We'll talk a bit more about that. But Pepita, you are joining this particular space. If we are to compare the period that Nshuti has been in this space.
Since 2010.
Yeah, So what's your story? What's the motivation coming from Pesachoice yourself, one of the financial inclusion, spaces or contributors? What's your story?
My story started as a third culture kid. I grew up in Rwanda, but also went to school in the US for about 10 years and worked there for a tech public affairs startup. And what I realized quickly was the fact that Africa was time and time again forgotten in the conversation. When you're on the Hill and you're hearing lobbyists, constantly think about how they can, exploit Africa without really giving us a chance to, exert ourselves and advocate for ourselves, I decided to move back. And I remember moving back was, in 2020, peak COVID. And the reason I did that was because I truly believe that I could learn from Rwanda, especially because of the work like, people like Nshuti have done in really bringing Rwanda to this stage. And I joined Pesachoice because of the vision. So Pesachoice is an HR-enabled fintech. So we built an HR platform for the continent. And we primarily focus on the informal markets. And then through the HR platform, we're able to offer low interest rate salary advances to employees whose employers are using our systems. And for me, I think financial inclusion is it's a ticket to freedom, right? And I think financial literacy, money is the language, and few people understand it.
Right.
And my passion is to really help people understand what the language of money is about.
Yeah.
And so through Pesachoice, we quickly realized that there was a huge lack of financial literacy, and are now working to figure out different tools to make sure that our clients who are utilizing our systems are able to not only, yes, borrow and build credit, sustainable credit, but also understand how to use credit and leverage credit to advance forward.
Interesting. And I like you mentioned the point that financial inclusion is the road to freedom.
Yes.
But Lucy, you mentioned that there's still gaps. So I'm sure there's still those who are still on that long walk to that freedom that she speaks about.
You see, people know, especially business people, know what to do with money, right? It's what, if you look at I'll stay a lot on the border communities, for instance. As much as there's business propensity, the highest business propensity in many borders, they're still the least digitally and financially included communities on the continent. They're self-employed. So the salary thing is a luxury. So when it comes to salaried, how many salaried people are there? However, that person who's working for themselves, selling their cabbages right from the farm, selling them to a truck driver who's going to pick them, take them to Chimirongo market, where the traders will buy in various portions so that she can ultimately sell to her customers and be able to now to leverage the lending opportunities that Pesachoice brings. How do we get that farmer who, for some reason, in financial inclusion is looked at as another entity, but not an entrepreneur? So if we looked at that person as a business, as an individual business, who has goods they're selling, ensure that they're equipped with a digital tool, and a digital financial service that would allow them to count they sold 1,000 cabbages, which they already know, but now that money is coming to them digitally, and when Pesachoice is able to reach them with their system, they can gauge what their credit worthiness is, and therefore be able to lend them appropriately so that the cabbage farm, if it's a small strip, becomes an even bigger strip, or they now set up a stall, whatever it is that they're able to grow. And that is what you see at land borders. They're trading mostly in foodstuffs. It's someone carrying a cassava basket across to Rwanda from DRC and going back with cassava. How do we ensure that, one, they no longer have to cross the border, because whoever they're connected to can receive digital payments. Then they create another job of a bicycle that will collect the cassava and cross
So
the
about
border.
the value chain.
Yes, so the whole value chain, that's where the gap is. And in that gap is where women and youth are the majority.
Right.
So that's typically it. And when you look at the ownership of mobile phones, the ownership of accounts, the access to credit, there's typically a 4, 5, even more gap in terms of financial inclusion. The World Bank has the Findex, that they release every year around financial inclusion, and you see places where the gap is small, but others, in fact, during the pandemic, grew to over 16%. And if we move at the pace we are going today, it will take 138 years, I think, to be able to close those gaps. So enter digital financial inclusion, enter trade, which employs majority of Africans. Few of us are salaried. Majority are doing business for themselves, whether it's I'm a laborer or I own a business, whatever it is. And that financial inclusion and other value-added services like these loans, which are really what everybody needs to grow, then we have to close the gaps. It's a huge business opportunity. And now as we become one Africa market, I know I wanted to buy a bag from Kenya, but the payment was tough because
I needed to use mobile money, or I need to use a bank transfer. Everything is costly, and I'm just counting the cost.
Yeah.
How do we ensure that I think is
I mean, they didn't pay for it, so we not be able. I like that you don't remember the name.
No, the brand is a lovely
Yes,
leather
the leather
product.
products, I know about
But
them,
when it
yes.
came to payment, it became a snack. But
Yeah,
how do you
yeah.
ensure that people can enjoy leather products
Yeah.
from Kenya,
Yeah.
from Mali, from Burkina, across the continent?
Yeah.
The missing piece
Yeah.
is payment.
The missing piece is payment. And Pepita, I want to pick from there because even Lucy mentioned women and young people, remain, at the center of where this gap actually needs to be closed in. Talk to us a bit about even when you put together your, value proposition, the business plan. How does what Lucy just said inform that process of wanting to fill the gap, especially for Rwanda in particular?
So when we first started with Pesachoice, it was a game of, Pesachoice has been here for around 6 years. We failed tremendously, miserably, and we've also succeeded. Exactly. But I think failure to me, without failure, there's no success, right? Yeah. And so every failure that we've had has contributed to us being successful. And the iteration of Pesachoice that we have today is a result of all those times failing. Yes. We started building the HR platform just thinking of salaried workers, like you're saying, right? And then quickly we realized that the biggest and most vulnerable part of the community was the informal sector, was people who are self-employed, was farmers. I remember my CEO, Davis, and I, since we both lived in the US, when I graduated high school, I got a credit card in the mail from, various banks, right? Because there's this, tendency to want to lend. And I couldn't for the life of me understand.
Exploit.
It is exploit, yeah, I definitely agree. But I couldn't understand in Rwanda for the life of me why a farmer who's producing 2 tons of cabbage, like you're saying, is unable to go to a bank and get at least an advance on salary, right? It was just a problem that we both couldn't fathom. It was like, why is it so? He's producing something, right? He's actually producing something. And all he needs is a little salary advance to be able to keep his crop for when, it goes at a higher bid, and then be able to make more money that way, right? And so we developed the fintech aspect of the business under that guise. And we quickly realized that farming communities, tradesmen, all needed access to finance. And they actually had, with data, the cool thing with technology is that you have data, right? Yeah. Traditional financial institutions have their own tools. Fintechs, we use data. And with data, we quickly...
Everyone uses data
to
inform lending,
yes. No.
Even though collateral remains the number one credit determinant.
For us, we use data. We don't use collateral, right? And so the data really showed that these communities were not only the ones that were willing to pay back that loan, but also could actually incur such loans and repay them in a good way. And so we started talking to different SACCOs, which the really great thing about Rwanda is that it's so connected. And so you're able to talk to a SACCO in Huye that already has the banking software and integration that Pesachoice can use with our machine learning and be able to gather data and be able to extend loans, right? And so the one thing that really helped us in Rwanda was the fact that we already had some of the groundwork done, right? And so women and the youth are at the forefront of these issues. And the thing is, women are the best, women over 50 are the best people to lend to, period. Because they only borrow when they need money, and they pay it back as soon as they can.
And I'm seeing Lucy smiling, especially when you mentioned the groundwork had been laid. And I think you're speaking about what Lucy and the rest of the teams have to. But Lucy, it's still a long way to go, I think, because
it doesn't have to be.
But it doesn't have to be. I like that. Let's talk about the barriers and what we need to do, even as the world converges here in Rwanda for Women Deliver. What do we need to do, especially from the conversations that are even happening here today? What are your expectations? What are the things that need to be done now to be able to deal with these barriers? You mentioned about the payment you wanted to do, but it was still a problem. 10, 15 years later, from the times we started talking about going cashless. What needs to be done to deal with the barriers to cashless? And financial inclusion?
The number one barrier and solution is political will. Because money moves based on how government has allowed for money to move. When it comes to digital payments, everything is in the control of the central bank.
Yeah.
The limits, everything is in control of the central bank.
Yeah.
When when it comes to cross-border trade, for instance, there is Airtel here, there is Airtel in Uganda,
Kenya,
in DRC, in Tanzania. We're surrounded by Airtel. But today, to make a merchant payment is not possible in Airtel or MTN. Okay, technology, possible. Regulatory, not possible. And so government has to recognize the stored opportunity and value that is sitting in stopping transactions from happening within these networks that are already connecting us from a cross-border perspective. And who is most impacted is those small traders that we call informal, and yet they're the most popular in serving our communities. So I like to call them the popular economy, not the informal sector, right? Because what they do is formal. They sell goods, services every single day. It's where majority of the people go because of the service that they get. Now, how do we ensure that financial instruments work for them? Many times the barriers are the cost of getting an account, the cost of transacting, right? So because of the P2P nature of digital transactions today, I have to pay as a trader the send money cost and the FX, right?
Yes, of course, yes.
Now, if I do a merchant payment, and through that I have to calculate do I need to pay from Rwanda francs to Uganda shillings. With merchant payments that are, an Airtel merchant code, I enter your code, automatically it gives me the Uganda current, it gives me the Uganda person's account. I don't need to calculate because it would show me their account in Uganda shillings. I enter the amount in Uganda shillings, I pay, and I'm done. There is no extra send money. The only thing is the FX conversion for me as a consumer. For the merchant, typically, it's the merchant commission that they pay the service provider for making that payment possible. And from that, they're able to see the cash flow of this trader and be able to lend them accordingly, just like she mentioned salary, but for farmers, it's income. They're selling something. For traders, it's income. They're getting something. So how do we utilize that cash flow information to where you don't need to bring your roof as collateral? Your cash flow is your collateral. Your sales are your collateral for you to get credit. So there is the government being able to ensure there is no barrier to facilitating those merchant payments, which we need to activate. And then cost of doing business needs to be managed, cost of having an account. But what I love about merchant payments specifically is because of that value-added service they can get, insurance for their business. And Urwego Opportunity Bank did this a long time ago. They lend to small traders, they're working in groups, their community is their collateral. Each of them has an amount they need, and they started off in cash, they digitized that, and life has become easier. So how do we ensure that happens, especially for the border community, that when it comes to ICT infrastructure is not there, when it comes to financial services, they're there, but they're constrained that they have to deposit cash on this side, pick it up on the other side. And you hear of the things women particularly endure. You're frisked sometimes to look for the money. There's robberies that happen. The indignity of moving with cash from a security perspective, indignity of it is just not helping these women, not helping because they're not helpless, but it's not supporting these women be all that they can be. And so that's what I love about digital financial services. And we have the UN Principles for Responsible Digital Payments that are really about make sure that you're designing for users, make sure everything is transparent, make sure payments are interoperable so that we can be able to drive and deepen financial inclusion. President Ruto has come out in a big way to champion this, specifically around the CFTA. You see the formation of PAPs, specifically to make life easy from a settlement perspective by removing the third currency. The political will is there from the Continental Free Trade Area. And there's an upcoming protocol on digital trade, which I've had the opportunity to be part of. I have the opportunity of being part of the process, that if we accelerate its implementation, which sits especially with regulation, we can see the fruits of the fourth industrial revolution that is digital in the lives of every single one of the 1.4 billion Africans and more that are coming to enjoy services that Pesachoice. And then there's that innovation bit that comes with that data component, because if brick and mortar banking can't reach the border, the fintechs are hungry, and we see Save and MVend here that are already doing that, digitizing cooperatives, helping them, and it's digitizing their bookkeeping so that they're able to access affordable credit. So they're already doing things with their money the best they can, because when you borrow within the group, it's not the 16-20% that you need to pay, it's 10%. And they can change that number based on how they wish. And they don't have money sitting around that they pay for cooperative to be part of the cooperative. It's money they're using to turn around their business. And I had the opportunity to see that at Zimbabwe and Zambia border, visiting during the Transform Africa Summit, but it's the same story you will find at the Ghana-Togo border, the DRC Rwanda border in Busia. It's the same story along. So digitization of those communities, ensuring that they have dignified financial services is important. And all these are lessons that I learned right here in Rwanda that I'm able to bring to the continental agenda. The African Union, this is the African Union decade, which the presidents decided in 2020 to 2030, the African Union decade for women's financial and economic inclusion. What remains is execution.
And that has always been the challenge. Execution has always been the challenge, because ideas are there, nice paper documents have always been there. Yeah, we just need to stop talking. Can we just even stop now and we just go? Yeah.
No, but the politicians.
And we've had a lot of that there's lack of political will. And I've even jokingly sometimes suggested maybe we need a political school or a school of political will, where politicians are passed through that to be able to be made to understand why political will is needed.
No, I think politicians just need to appreciate business. You see, they are not inconvenienced. They don't feel the pain that everybody else feels, because everything is done for them. So naturally, they're out of touch with these problems. So bringing them right to their doorstep is essentially what needs to happen. And then once they know, I believe they cannot in good conscience, especially from a revenue perspective, let that opportunity go.
Right. Pepita, for you, I mean, let's talk a bit about also the barriers, but also looking at some of the opportunities that you've seen that those gaps or those barriers have created for those within the financial inclusion space that want to venture in this particular space.
I think the first I will say, and that's for all tech enthusiasts who are willing to create technology, is especially when you're designing for women, include women, please. Time and time again, I have met great ideas from a male perspective, and then when you talk to an actual woman, then no, women already have community, right? There's a reason why the communities they've built, the cooperatives they build work so well, is because women have community. That's why they're able to lend to one another and all that stuff.
Nothing
right?
for us without us.
Exactly. So always include women when creating technology.
Prioritize.
Exactly.
You're designing
For women, please
Prioritize.
prioritize women time and time again. When you're going to get that documentation, right, as a PM, go to women, go to these women at those borders, sit down with them, look at how their lives are going, and then come back. I can guarantee you what you thought you were creating versus what they actually need, two very different things,
Yeah.
right? And I think a big opportunity I've seen is the opportunity for passporting. And what passporting is for example, Pesachoice has a lending license in Rwanda, right? We have an NDFI license. If countries like Kenya, Uganda, all our border countries, right, Tanzania, would get together, all the national banks would, come together and allow for, if a company in Rwanda has a lending license, can go to Kenya without getting a license because they already have the license in Rwanda.
That's the purpose of the protocol on digital trade.
Exactly, right? That allows us
At least there's
to
something
then
in the
be
works.
more agile, right? Because then, okay, all of a sudden, Tanzania is a new market that opens up without having to go through hours and hours in negotiation with lawyers and back and forth through email and traveling, right? Because passporting allows us to be able to be agile, right? There's also an opportunity, I would say, for maybe someone to think about a way of creating digital passporting, right? Going ahead into those countries, having these licenses and then being able to give them to other fintechs, right? There's so many opportunities around that.
Right.
But the key to what Lucy is saying, the key is for us to be able to work with one another. The key is for us to be able to transact cross-border without having a fear of, like you're saying, FX issues or just the difference in terms of transaction, how it goes in one country versus the other. You already have the MTNs, the Airtel, the Orange Money in French West Africa. They're already there. Utilize them, right? So passporting is
to rewrite, reinvent the wheel.
Yes.
On that point, and that's why we, I mean, it's no coincidence that under the president's chairmanship, President Kagame's chairmanship, the CFTA was activated here. But it's not a new idea. If you look at Thomas Sankara's speech at the OAU launch back in 1987, he was talking about the One Africa market, how we need to simplify things. And that was activated. It's something that had been tabled and approved, but it needed 22 countries to ratify. The president spent a lot of time bringing those 22 countries together to bring it into force. And the AFCFTA secretariat that was created to do that. Now we're at a point of talking about putting in place that protocol on digital trade and that passporting is not just of your license, but of your customer credentials. If my ID here allows me to get an account and we have interoperated system, I should be able to open an account in Abidjan if I choose to because of that passporting, or Pesachoice should be able to work in any market in this 55-country union to get things. And another of the things that are in that protocol that we're aiming to ensure that politicians can make it happen. There is a lot of enthusiasm. The AFCFTA Secretary General is such a champion for this work. So all that we try to do here, which is around making sure everyone has an ID, making sure people get an account, is exactly what the protocol is doing by removing those cross-border, and it's not just on the digital trade side, but it's also, we talk about the movement of people and everything, all that is sitting in that. So we see, I think, the political will there from a perspective of making the CFTA work. Now execution of that to ensure we make this work within the next 2 years, especially because technology evolves a lot, is where the work is. Right. So you can be rest assured it's not just on table, it's on paper. With ratification, it moves into implementation, and I think we are in such a good place with that political will of the CFTA. For innovation, because there is no innovation without digital inclusion. and with over the continent being under 30, over 70% women and youth, really we have no choice. Our financial independence and development really depends upon the financial inclusion of women and youth, the availability of services to everybody, and when it comes to payments, that they're trustworthy and people see value in them, like these great loans that are now able to be done as a result. So that work is where I spend most of my time, and it's really exciting because I have a great foundation here in Rwanda, and also the championship of President Kagame for digital transformation, and that landing now within the protocol on digital trade is exciting.
Right.
So Imvugo Niyongiro is what we need to see.
Yeah, walking the talk.
Yes.
Peter, I want us to just pick, closing remarks. I'm told we are running out of time, but just where do we go from here? Especially when you talk about, fintech, and using fintech as a catalyst for inclusion, but remembering that we still have a wide digital skills gap. How do you ensure that we use this, but without leaving anyone behind?
Yes.
Just in closing.
I think the private sector also has a huge role to play, right? And I think for what you were describing, Lucy, I also see fintechs being able to work alongside your teams, because we are dealing with these problems on a day-to-day basis. We want them to change just as much as they want them to change. And the private sector has the opportunity to also be able to push more doors, right? Sometimes because it's about capital, it's, you have investment, you have VCs involved, all that stuff. And so I think the private sector needs to accept its role in this, right? And one thing, for example, in the digital skills gap that at Pesachoice we've done is we have a makeshift Pesachoice Academy where we've trained over 25 youth who were interested in learning about coding and learning about anything related to technology, and we've trained them, right? Now, most of them end up being poached, quite frankly, for way more money than we can afford to give them. And it's a bittersweet, situation, because we are very happy, right, for them. They're now advancing at a tremendous pace, and for a lot of them, they're now being able to help their families in ways that they've never dreamed it could be possible. But also for us, we have to go back and train other people. But that's the nature of what we do, right? I think private businesses have to be willing to accept the very fact that we'll have to do a lot of human capital development, accept the fact that we'll have to work alongside organizations such as Lucy's to be able to push this agenda forward, because, as what you're saying, political will, maybe if it's not there, well, the private sector has it. Because I can guarantee you, if I'm in a VC meeting and they're asking me why are my numbers looking like this, I'm going to find a way to solve that problem, right? And it's also working with the youth. I think most people talk about the youth in terms of well, we need to help them. But, woe is me and for us. But the youth is really driven and they have a hunger. So educate them on financial literacy. Find ways to go to schools and already have these digital skills implemented. If that's part of your CSR, corporate social responsibility for your organization, do it, right? Dedicate a few devs to go to X schools and work alongside these young people, right? Work together. I think the private sector just has the same, if not bigger role in making this happen as the public sector does.
Right, interesting. Lucy, you have the last word, and she mentioned schools, and I remembered Miss Geek.
When it comes to digital financial services, I think M-Pesa has shown us all that is possible. And it was political will. Technology came, political will made it happen, right? I think it was a decision between the central bank governor, the Minister of ICT, sitting down with the president himself to get him to appreciate. So when it comes to skills capacity building, I think governments are best placed to do this work. But when it comes to financial products, clearly the owners and innovators of those products know that their lives depend on it, and they go out and find the customers. So nothing moves without political will, and the private sector is hungry enough to get it done. If you look at some of the, I mean, we have every lesson here on this continent when it comes to inclusion. It just needs to be met with affordable devices. Who can make that happen? Government can help in that regard. We need to have manufacturing, obviously, of those devices on the continent. This is what the One Africa market can help us with. So how do we get the marathons across the continent affordably, or any other device? How do we ensure that you know, at a community level, everybody has the services that they need to build and grow, especially those who have taken the leap and started to be a business, whether I'm selling peanuts on the road or roasted plantains, or I have a super small shop. All of us need to have services that allow us to grow and employ the next person. And for youth, the more these opportunities of skills and tools grow, more hunger, more opportunity for innovation to happen. But it really all starts with government making that commitment, which you saw here in Rwanda. Vision 2020 had ICT as a driver. Government invested, took the lead in investing in that infrastructure. Private sector built on that. Regulation followed to make payments work, to facilitate mobile money. Now, how do we ensure it really reaches every community? And you get impressed when you drive in some of the most remote areas and you find an agent there of Equity or MTN or Airtel, and you know that community is served. But then when you go to these small shops or the small stalls, they are not accepting digital payments. So there's the foundational thing that we do every day, which is to buy and sell. Once we digitize that, fintech, my goodness, the possibilities are endless. So politics, investment in making sure that everyone has access, every community is connected, people have affordable devices, because we are price sensitive. It's not an African thing. Everyone is looking for a saving somewhere. So let's make sure that the same services the people working in the president's office enjoy are equally accessible by every community in Rwanda. And I think Rwanda continues to show and invest in that area, looking for partners left and right to make it happen. And the private sector is, you know, it's mostly banks and the SACCOs. Government is digitizing SACCOs. Fintechs are there to help make that happen. I think we show the possibilities, but with the best financial inclusion solutions for the continent living here, created by Africans, there's enough reason and proof for us to keep believing, but especially to keep working to make it happen. And really, it is government to join hands with the private sector, which has the money to get these things going, because financial inclusion is, in fact, a profitable business for the private sector, and especially for government as well, from growing the revenue pot, so they don't have to have huge tax, place huge tax burdens on the few that are salaried or the few that are registered businesses. So we have to make it happen very quickly, especially because it is women and youth that live in this business sector that we must mobilize to deliver on the dreams that we have as a continent.
Yeah. Lucy, I'm really tempted to ask you this one bonus question.
Sure.
How do the next 13 years look like for you? Because in the last 13 years, you've been working on this and you've been hands on deck. What does the next 13 years look like? In the next 13 years, what do you see if you close your eyes?
I see that my voice is no longer needed because things are happening and I am focused on solving another problem. Yeah. Maybe it is right now, my heart is in women and girls' reproductive health, so we'll see what happens there. Yeah. But from a financial inclusion perspective, my hope is that next year I'm no longer needed because the continent is moving in the direction that we need to go, and with organizations like the FCFTA Secretariat, the vision of the African Union Commission in the Women and Youth Financial and Economic Inclusion Initiative for 2030, led by Dr. Monique, Smart Africa, I think we can certainly look over the horizon and know that I won't be needed to sit here and continue advocacy. So next 13 years is to work myself out of financial inclusion and into some other problem that the continent needs to solve.
Right. How about Pepita? What do you see from what we've been discussing? How does the future look like for financial inclusion in Rwanda?
I see a very positive future. I always tell my friends back in the US, I'm like, I haven't touched cash in like 3 months compared to you guys. You guys are very, you're far behind. I see a future almost similar to what I experienced in China, where everything is just, financially digital. And not only is it positive, but it's also really including the women and the youth, right? And I think Rwanda has already set itself up for success, and just the likes of, for example, mobile money being so successful in such a short amount of span speaks a lot to it, and also the fact that businesses are willing to work together, right? We have a partnership with the MTN Mobile Money. And banks, more and more banks are willing to have partnerships with us, right? They no longer see us as a threat, but they see us as a partner, right? Because we are much more agile. We don't mind taking the risks. They can take then the other, the people that we prove are great and then grow them, right? So more and more banks are willing to partner with us. There's more and more people willing, also angel investors willing to invest. I remember when Davis, our CEO, started, it was very hard to raise capital in Rwanda, almost impossible. At Norskin last year, I think Rwanda raised around $10 million in investments. At Norskin alone, they've been able to raise over $30 million this year. And we still haven't finished, right? So it's also having these spaces and bringing in all of this expertise from other countries that's helping us as well. And so I think Rwanda is on the up and up. Not only do we have it do we have the political will, like Lucy said, but we also have the hunger in the private sector to make it happen. And like I said, I always invite more and more angel investors to invest in these tools, in these technologies, right? Invest in this infrastructure that's being created right now, because I can guarantee you in the next 13 years, it will pay off.
And they can take that to the bank.
And
they don't even have to wait.
Exactly.
Honestly, the next 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a huge opportunity.
Yes, it is. For Rwanda, as a Rwandan company, when you create something, you create it with a Pan-African approach. Rwanda is a tiny country. We simply do not have the market. But it's the best place to start. The reason why we started here is because the governance allows us to be free and to start and to fail and to get back again and to fail and to get back on again and to also advocate for ourselves, right? And to I don't think I've met such like the Ministry of ICT. They're so easy to talk to and understand things so quickly. And so the reason why, so when you create a company in Rwanda, you create for the entire continent as a result, right? Because of how small our country is, but the reason why, but also having such great governance, it allows us to expand so quickly. And so I invite...
Not so small, eh?
We're
I mean,
not.
13 million people is a lot of market.
It is. But when you're talking to a VC, they're like, Nigeria.
That's not even it. But then also, and I think it's good you come in this, because the aspect of follow-up and measuring results, because we cannot achieve what the country has been able to achieve without measuring results and being able to, check whether we are on track or not on track. Talk to us a bit about that, because you've been involved, you've been on the table checking, and from the point where you sit and decide this is the roadmap to the point where you're now saying we've achieved targets X, we are now remaining with X, Y, Z. How significant is this for this journey?
It's everything, because you set that vision. We had the national ICT plans that started with along Vision 2020.
Yes.
And they are bucketed in 5 years so that you're able to measure against what you set.
Yeah.
And when it comes to technology, you can't afford to not measure, because there is what you may have started to think about in 2010, but is no longer relevant in 2012, and therefore you have to do that midterm review and refine your plans and continue changing. To have an ICT ministry, ICT and innovation ministry that is consistently checking, and even the minister herself is a practitioner. It makes life, so that deliberate political leadership and practical application, because for Pesachoice to exist, the Digital Economy Ministry has to be switched on to be able to work with the central bank that has been here for since before independence, to also move with the times and support innovation and put sandboxes in place and change the regulation, have a fintech policy in place, have a innovation policy in place. So that measurement, that setting the vision, putting down milestones, measuring yourself, seeing where you need to change, what else you need to introduce, is really impressive to watch. And so how do we, the president has consistently thought bigger Pan-African agenda, and how do we ensure that whatever we're doing is setting us up for that borderless continent where Rwandan products are just as relevant in Egypt and vice versa. So it's critical to measure, and I think that's why even the protocols that we have in place are 5 or whatever period, so that we set a timeline of implementation, we measure how well we're doing, and continue to refine until every single African is able to move their goods and services, and is able to move themselves as well across borders without issue, and that goes for money. That makes all of that happen.
Right. I like that, and I think I want to close the curtains to this particular program, this conversation, but I see Pepita wants to add one last parting shot. Yeah, you can go ahead.
No. I just really wanted to thank Lucy on the last remarks, because I truly believe that if money moves, people move, right? So as long as we get that money moving, the people will follow. And it's been great to be able to speak with someone who's already done this work for us, because I'm very young, so I'm coming in.
It's the right environment.
Yes, the right environment. Yes, but I came in quite late, and just the fact that I was able to move so quickly, and Pesachoice was able to move so quickly, is because of all the work you've done, right? And the foundation.
It's really the work the government has done.
Exactly.
But 2010. I had a salary, I couldn't access it at any ATM or spend it at any POS. By 2012, that had changed. 2012, 2013, more money came and blew things out of the water, so that now the local community is served. Now we're looking at how do we make trade as easy as possible. That's amazing, and what a privilege to be in a place where government is hungry and ready to move. Young people have the opportunity to make things happen, and we can inspire a region, inspire the continent to take action to get things done. So a lot to be hopeful for.
Right.
Yeah, quite literally.
What a way to end the conversation. A lot to be hopeful for. Thank you so much, both of you. Nshuti Mbabazi, Lead Africa Advocacy and Partnerships, Better Than Cash Alliance, and of course, Pepita Melisa, Growth and Partnerships Lead at Pesachoice. Thank you both of you for making time.
Thank you.
All right, and of course for watching. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. It doesn't end on these 4 walls. It continues across our social media platforms at CNBC Africa. Keep talking to us. As always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye for now.